kind of think that dealing with Toph actually might have been some of the initial grounding, because she's the one who saw him for what he is, because she can see. She who has eyes to see, as the case may be. And I think that could be that's like my first pass at it. Everyone else has to be aware of it, but it's actually the most important that a firebender have humility in the first place, because it's so easy for it to get out of control. We talk a lot about control when we talk about fire. So I think that's kind of a first pass at it. I hope that answered the question. Please feel free to clarify if I didn't, but I think that's where I would come from on that.
There's actually a couple of thoughts that I have in relation to what you said just now, because one of the key scenes, in fact, in Avatar, when Zuko is trying to come to Team Avatar and offer his assistance as a firebending instructor, he has accidentally burned Toph because she came to his tent in the middle of the night, and he got scared and freaked out, and and just reacted, with his firebending. And he goes back to Aang and the group, and everybody's really angry at him because of this past that he has. But he tells, he talks about the difficulty of controlling fire, and he apologizes to Toph for accidentally burning her. And
he actually apologizes in that episode 3 times. I tallied. There's 3 different apologies to different people in that episode.
And he tells her how difficult it is to control fire, and that's when.
But that he should know better.
What's that?
But that he should know better. That's the part that really brought it home to me.
But what I really love about that is that that's the moment that Aang realizes that Zuko needs to be his firebending instructor, because Zuko knows the destructive power of fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's definitely he knows what it can do. I mean, it's permanently impressed upon his face. He definitely knows its destructive power, and he's been riding its destruction for a while. That's part of why he can't bend. For our episode immediately following the Western Air Temple, the important field trip where we go find the Sun Warriors.
Yes. But that's when he is starting to become able to bend again, after he encounters the dragons, and the dragons pass him as worthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so he has to re-encounter fire on its own terms, and not on the terms that he's been holding it to, which has always been rage and anger, and just that sound kind of woo-woo, but a lot of negativity has been driving him, because he's very, very hurt and very, very broken. But once you take the steps to healing, sometimes you end up with a little bit of a backdraft, and at this point he can't really afford it. So it was both an interesting narrative device, and I think really handled his psyche really well at the time.
Something you said a moment ago about earthbending, I was curious about in terms of Toph, because when we first meet Toph, she is in the arena. She's the champion. She's like this incredible earthbender, and nobody knows who she is. And she's just beating these guys in the arena constantly. And she's very proud of that. So I'm just curious about how Toph's personality, being grounded in earth, and yet at the same time crowing about her triumphs, how those two work together with humility. Because
cool. I mean, because the opposite of pride is humility. It is not shame, it is humility. And so Zuko struggles with shame, Toph struggles with pride, Katara struggles with pride. But I kind of think as we go along, Toph truly is exceptional, and she calms down when she has the ability to really use her abilities for good and for something powerful. When people when Team Avatar begins to see her as she is, and she feels like she is a whole person, she stops so much having something to prove. But at the same time, she's so I really find her confidence to be remarkable in its own right, because you sort of instinctively want people to self-deprecate, but she truly is the best, and she knows it. And that comfort is actually, or that confidence is actually kind of comforting to me, because it means that she might have a chance at finding her flaws elsewhere, because she knows she's the best earthbender to ever exist right now. She literally invented metal bending. But she also knows, like, as we go along, she doesn't get as much play because she's technically a secondary character, but we do get some of her realizing she has some blind spots, like socially and that sort of thing. But when she can be seen for who she is, she stops trying to prove something. And I find that, like, that's kind of where it comes in. Yeah, blind spots. I mean, she is the one who has eyes to see the most, though. She's the one who's got the most insight on a lot of people. It's just that she'll, like, like everyone, she's got she's got things that make her mad. But I do think I do think that when she can be seen as a whole person, it makes her less performative on the, like, pride front, and it, like, that helps her calm down a little bit. Obviously, like, it'll still be something she struggles with. Pride is insidious, but she's not proving anything anymore.
One point about the blindness too is that she cannot see through her eyes, but she can see through the earth. So that's why she goes barefoot. She goes barefoot because that is her sight. Her sight is that connection, that groundedness. So, okay, we've got some questions now.
Yay!
Yay! With regards to firebending coming from anger and passion, Erin, was it you had mentioned about the Fire Nation outlawing dancing in the headband episode, removing a positive outlet for passion, or did I read that somewhere else?
You read that somewhere else. I didn't mention it. I have not actually seen that particular meta take. I like that. Yeah, I don't think I cited the headband almost at all in this talk, simply because it's a gang episode and not so much a Zuko episode. But that is a very good point. There's a lot that we start to see in season 3 about Fire Nation culture, where they have kind of lost sight of who they are, which is part of where, like, my secondary or, like, lower level point of Zuko having secondary motivation of the good of the Fire Nation being present. And, like, if I could probably write an entire talk on Aang's memory of the Fire Nation and Zuko's desire to, like, restore it to its truly former glory. But that also feels like it would be more of a meta conversation that doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of textual support. But the outlawing of dancing definitely is a good example of ways that they've redirected their passions. But they also, actually, that episode has a couple of really good examples where, if you look at the way that they handle their schooling, it's basically, like, incredibly strict, and to the point where, like, children are not allowed to play effectively. And gets in trouble, and the headmaster says he'll have him sent to reform school, by which he means the coal mines. We're talking a punishing direction of so yes, a punishing direction of education and indoctrination. I'm trying to look for all the words, sorry. And they really do direct a lot of their energy into the military. I wonder how much, and I mean, I'm going to be speculating just a smidge because I'm not very good at this era of history, but I wonder how much of it they pulled from World War II Japan, where there were stories of, like, children being taught to fight in the streets so that they could fight people, like, if they were invaded. World War II Japan was a very different place than we know Japan today. And I do wonder if there was some Fire Nation pulling from that, which could indirectly be suppression of passions or redirection of passions into anger and hatred and that sort of thing, and, like, nationalism, rah, rah, all that jazz. But I just wonder if it was more of, like, a historic decision to make.
Yeah. I'd also like to speak to one issue that came up in that particular question, and that's firebending coming from anger and passion. I think that's more of a corruption of firebending than inherent firebending, because when we do go to, the sun warriors, and we meet the dragons, it's not coming from that place at all. And we also see that that's not where Iroh's firebending is coming from, or his electric bending. Neither one of those is coming from anger and all of that. Maybe it was in his youth, but as a much wiser man now, it's coming more out of the necessity of the moment, and also trying to direct his nephew. It is kind of ironic that Zuko is so full of, his firebending coming from anger, when his firebending master is his uncle, who is not coming from that same place. But, Iroh is trying more subtly to direct his nephew than oppressively direct his nephew. And ultimately, that's the path that works with Zuko.
And not to sound like an old lady here, but Zuko's still a teenager. Like, all of his emotions are big and giant all the time. Like, he doesn't have an in-between. He has a 0 and he has a 500. So Iroh definitely has like a decent amount of the wisdom and patience of age that comes with him. But we also don't, when we meet the Sun Warriors, we don't meet any children as far as I remember. So we don't see how they train their people. We just see that the dragons deem them worthy or not. But that one, we talk a lot about how fire is life-giving, and it's warmth and heat. And I mean, if you want to extrapolate, it's cooking and all that sort of thing. But that's something to keep an eye on, that like some of Zuko's specifically firebending, Zuko's firebending coming from anger, passion, rage, is he's a 16-year-old boy. And he just hasn't redirected it.
He's also a member of the royal family. I mean, he's the great grandson of Sozin, and who conquered, who went on this quest for conquest during the time of Sozin's comet. So we do have that as well. There is that family aspect to it, but there's also a different family involved. And I don't know if we really want to talk about that, because it's such a big spoiler in Zuko's character arc.
Oh, I mean, I told everyone that if they wanted to know about what was going on, they can go watch the show. But yeah, no, his grandfathers are Sozin and Avatar Roku, which is really important. And I heard that apparently in the comics they retconned that. So I say forget the comics, because that's so important narratively. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, like huge.
Apparently they retconned it and made it all about like Ozai something illegitimate something, and I am just horrified. So we can just decide that those don't exist.
The comic book that I read was the one with in which they seek his mother, and that really does confirm, the relationship with Avatar Roku.
Yeah, okay, that's good, because I'd heard this from someone else who told me this, because I haven't really read the comics. I didn't have the ability to find them, and I personally have weird approaches to canon. But it was I was horrified. I was like, what do you mean he's technically illegitimate? Like, that just takes the teeth out of everything. You have undermined your narrative. Congratulations, you've ruined it.
Was that person responding to the same particular narrative? Because Ozai might believe that he's illegitimate, but he's not. I can't remember.
I thought it was canon that he was supposed to be illegitimate, and Ozai.
No, he is legitimate.
Okay.
He is the son of Ozai. And in fact, I believe he knows it. I think Ozai knows that Zuko is truly his son, and not the son of this other man.
Okay, because I thought that was like something about like that's the source of all the tension. Like, Ozai can just be a terrible person. It's okay. He's played by Mark Hamill. We know he's a bad guy. Like, he can just be a bad man driven by power and like rage and like a desire for like, you don't have to give him alternate motivations. He's already a pretty bad person. And he's proven to us again and again that he's a bad person. He and Ursa like schemed to take over the throne from Iroh. Like, Iroh knows that Ozai is not a good man. This comes up a couple times actually, where Zuko is claiming that like, yes, this time is going to be the time that my father accepts me, and Iroh is like, even in season 1, Iroh is like, my brother is not the person you think he is.
Yeah.
And it's very gentle, but also very much coming from a like, you want to think about this.
Yeah. I believe the quote is, my brother's not a forgiving man.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that is it. I don't actually have my notebook with all my quotes written down right now.
Because I remember that was such a strong moment, when he's advising his nephew not to speak up during the war council, but to just simply, keep go watch, learn what's happening, but do not talk. And of course, Zuko can't do that.
He's 13, like, come on.
13.
But, well, no, it was the one I have in mind, I think, is from later in, maybe, I don't know if it's later in season 1 from the episode The Storm, or if it's from something, because episode The Storm is where we got his backstory. It's episode 12. But somewhere in there, Zuko is talking about like, I will finally, I'm gonna get my honor back. My father will understand. And he's like, he's not a very understanding person.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we aren't reminded very often that Iroh and Ozai are brothers. We don't get a whole lot of that. But once in a while when we do, it comes from a place of like, I kind of see Iroh mourning the kind of person that Ozai has become.
Yeah. And of course, he knows from personal experience what Ozai can do.
Oh yeah, it's bad.
Okay, we have some more questions. And these are Toph questions. Okay, so we've got some Toph fans here.
I didn't mean to send it down that detour. Sorry, guys.
I don't even know if this is a question. These are some comments in the Q&A. I don't know if, and we may have some questions in the actual chat, but I'm having a hard time accessing the chat.
The chat doesn't look like it's got questions. It's got a note that the different nations were explicitly based on different real world cultures, which I actually didn't know that, but I will, for the sake of posterity, the Fire Nation is based on Japan, the Earth Kingdom is based on China, the Water Tribes are based on some of the Inuit peoples, and the Air Nomads are based on Tibetan monks specifically. Yeah, I know I pulled this specific historic example just because I knew about that, and I was wondering if that was more of an influence than the passions, simply because while there's a lot of depth here, and there's a lot of stuff you can pull through, and part of the reason Zuko's arc is so compelling, some of the secondary and tertiary stuff is almost, it's not necessarily afterthoughts, but I do trust that the creators had a lot of attention to their characters, but I'm not necessarily sure that everything had to tie itself in together in the background. Some things just might have accidentally fallen into place in a very thoughtful way. So this is not a legendarium.
It appears that a couple of the things that are in the two things that are still in the Q&A, and please people bring us your questions. They're mostly comments. Okay, I don't know if Toph gets past her pride, since the various statues of her all through Korra were almost certainly erected by her in her travels. I don't know about that.
I renounce Korra, honestly. Like, I haven't seen it since it came out. I have not super dealt with it. I really liked season 1. And just to be quite honest, I do not deal with it in this on purpose, because it opens up too many rabbit holes. So you can ask whatever you want about Korra, but I am going to be dealing primarily with, and almost explicitly with, the main series, because after that point in time, nothing else matters. Sorry, I don't want to be rude to anyone. I know there's a lot of people who love Korra. It's like a great show. It opens up a lot of rabbit holes, and it does a lot of weird things to some of our main characters along the way that feel kind of strange, and I don't feel like dealing with that. So, main series.
And another comment, Toph refuses to be helpless, and learning to accept help is how she steps away from her pride. I wonder about your thoughts on that.
I mean, yeah, no, I actually had pulled the clip where Iroh was talking to Toph to pull it out as a parallel for what Toph then gives as advice to Zuko. So Iroh talks to Toph when Toph storms off, and gets lost. Not lost, but yeah. So he has this conversation with her where he talks about like Zuko who's lost his way and trying to find himself, and she hears the advice that she needs to hear. And even though it's the advice that he would have liked to have given to Zuko, which she then passes on to him at Ember Island Players, which I also had that clip pulled, just again ran out of time. So they do have a lot closer of like problems, as the case may be. But learning to accept help was a big turn for her, and that was actually Iroh teaching her, because he did a really good job of exemplifying service. She was really mad that he served her tea, and she wanted to be able to do it on her own, and he pointed out that he did it because he wanted to. He's an example of service that's not it's not demeaning or condescending, which is what she had grown up with, because she's been sheltered and kind of oppressed. She's been sheltered and not treated like a whole person. She's treated like a doll, like a toy, like a collection. And so I think that Iroh also is the first one to really give her the opportunity to accept service as gift rather than as condescension.
And when Iroh comes knocking on their door,
she recognizes him.
And
everyone else is like, "What? You know each other?" Oh, it's great.
And she's like, "No, he's a good guy. He's okay."
Oh, we know each other.
Yeah, he's okay. But yeah, I found that kind of amusing, because she recognizes him because she does not have eyes to see. Mm-hmm. She has to rely upon all of her other senses to see.
Which is fantastic, because that actually, to a certain degree, gives her more insight into people when she wants to look for it. She is inherently not bound by the external marks of someone's nation. And especially because we don't really have accents in Avatar. I feel like accents would be a dead giveaway.
Okay, there's another question. I'm just wondering what the gist on the cost of the redemptive journey was, according to the different spiritual manuals referenced versus Zuko's story.
Can you say the question again? Because I feel like I missed
yeah, I'm not entirely sure I
operative word here. The
fully.
Cost?
Yeah. What the cost of the redemptive journey was? Okay, between the different spiritual manuals and Zuko's story, is there a distinction? Is it?
Okay, so I pulled from 3 fairly well-known spiritual manuals, but I also pulled from the beginner section of all of them, because we're dealing with people in a non-Christian environment, and there's only so far you can really go with a spiritual manual when you're dealing with at best virtuous pagans. So to like full disclosure here, I stuck primarily in the beginning section. If in case anyone noticed, we didn't make it past rule 2 in Ignatian discernment, because we're not going to get to consolation. We're not going to get to like communion with the divine, because we don't know the divine. Nobody's baptized here. So all that being said, I guess this is a virtuous pagan story, and I grabbed the information and the definitions from the spiritual manuals because they're useful for all of us, and they're things that it's a framework that I'm comfortable with. I've used almost all of them at some point in my life for different things. So it seemed like a natural framework to parse everything through, because in the Christian worldview, we talk about virtue, and virtue is almost inevitably, like, virtue is striving to the good, building good habits. And after a while, like, when you strive to the good, you're seeking to be united with God. And that's the point of most spiritual manuals, is how to discipline yourself to be united with God. Basically, looking for all the right words here. So I don't know if I could say that his redemptive journey had a spiritual cost in the same way. He just, he, yeah, I artificially imposed a Christian framework on a virtuous pagan story. That's really what that was. So we can only go so far. We're not going to get past rule 2. We're not going to get into consolation. We're not going to get into weird mysticism unless you really, 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 really want to. Like Iro can see the spirit world. I poked that with a stick in my talk prep notes. Didn't really do anything with it because we're dealing with a world where animism is not only the belief, but it's real. We're not. This isn't monotheism anymore. So. Yeah, I didn't answer your question, but I also didn't know what you were asking.
Okay, here's another question. Do you think that the guru that Aang visits is the opposite end of the spectrum from the rage passion of the Fire Nation?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So to be fair, the Fire Nation is encouraging rage, passion, and military forces because they are bent upon world domination right now. This is not the Fire Nation forever. This is the Fire Nation now. This is not the Fire Nation past, nor is it Fire Nation future. So this is currently under the reign of the Fire Lords from Sozin to Ozai, and it ends with Zuko. So just like to be clear, this is a really ugly footnote on Fire Nation history, or a really ugly chapter in Fire Nation history. It does not have to be bound by rage and passion. And we get that with the Sun Warriors. We get that with Zuko's promise of a better world. So let's bracket that. I think the guru is actually kind of the pinnacle of air nomad teaching. He is a specialist in air nomad spirituality. He's one of the last remaining ones, even though he's not an airbender, but he learned from the monks. It's very obvious by the way he talks and behaves. So whatever Aang learns from the guru, Aang could pass on to Zuko to help ground him along the way, because one of the things that we indirectly pick up that I think was deliberately woven in is that by the time we get to the end of the series, all of the benders have learned from each other. When you watch the way they behave, Zuko's able to take out Azula and the Agni Kai because he starts using moves that he picked up from Aang, like really big circular motions. Katara fights like a firebender. This girl uses knives of ice. Like, she is direct, she is straightforward. And even though like water by its nature wants to be fluid, she is forceful and forward. She has learned up on this. Someone has pointed out she uses earthbending style, waterbending, she's facing bloodbender. Everyone has learned from each other over the years. So we do want to, or over the 6 months they've traveled together. Sorry, it feels like so long because it's such a big story that way. But I think that the guru as an example and pinnacle of air bending and air nomad tradition is something that Aang could offer to Zuko as a way of grounding himself, especially if he finds the tempestuousness returning. But otherwise, I think, I don't know. I don't think you want to set up the Fire Nation as a whole in perpetuity as rage, passion, and anger. I think the Fire Nation under this 3 generations of really ugly people, and I say ugly like in their souls, is definitely propagating that. But part of the point of Zuko's redemption arc is to show us that people can change, and so therefore can nations. We can't lock people into what we see them as. So,
in fact, that was one of my points, was that Zuko's own repentance becomes his nation's repentance.
And it's very, very important. And I mean, there's definitely a lot of the World War II parallels pulling out again right there. Like, it's really easy to look at that, especially, everyone has to learn it anyway. So his nation is in repentance for a while, and that makes a ton of sense. And it's because he sees that the world is afraid of them. He's gone undercover, as the case may be, as an Earth Kingdom colonist, Earth Kingdom peasant. He has broken bread with them. I had a couple bits on that too. It just didn't quite fit into the overall narrative. Like where he goes off by himself and meets the Earth Kingdom family who are really kind to him, and he's misguidedly offering the son of this family a weapon to defend himself, which then gets, Zuko learns the episode, which then gets him in trouble and all that. Like, it just becomes this escalating story where Zuko is trying to do something right for these people, but he ends up causing more trouble than he wanted to, and then is effectively banished because he finally shows his true colors as a firebender to take down these bully Earth Kingdom soldiers. I think one of the things that we really get is that not everyone outside of the Fire Nation is magically good and exempt from having moral problems attributed to them, or like exempt from being jerks, because we end up with a lot of bully Earth Nation soldiers. A lot of them. The Earth Kingdom is huge, and a lot of their like residual soldiers who aren't fighting anymore, who are just kind of enlisted in the army, they're jerks. We see them all the time. They are jerks. So it's not just the Fire Nation that's oppressive, it's just different.
One of the things that strikes me about the episode that you were referring to is that at the end, after Zuko has shown that he's a firebender and has actually proclaimed who he is, which firebender he is, and he goes to that boy and tries to give him, I think is it the weapon? I can't recall.
Yeah, it's his knife, and it was a knife that Iroh gave him, so he's trying to pass this along.
Yeah, but the boy's response is, no, go away, I hate you. And the hatred isn't based on what Zuko has done in his life, it's based upon who he is. It's based upon the fact that he's a member of the Fire Nation. And it probably wouldn't matter that he was a member of the royal family. It's just that he's a Fire Nation person. He's a firebender. And so that hatred comes from what the Fire Nation has done, not just what Zuko's family has done. I think there's also a beautiful scene towards the end where Iroh is speaking with Zuko. This is after they're reunited at the end. And he talks about how we have to undo the sins of our family. And this is, I believe, when he tells him that we need to reclaim the Fire Nation's honor. And that's when Zuko internalizes that need to do that. And so that's what, spurs his proclamation at the end. But, he actually uses the word sins, the sins of our family.
Yeah, this is not a subtle show.
No.
I found that I didn't need to like read between the lines when I started pulling my clips. I'm like, oh no, you just said exactly what I wanted you to say. Okay. I had something that was really interesting that was building on that, and it didn't go. I just totally lost it. So,
do we have any more questions? Because we do have 10 more minutes in the Q&A, but we also got this Q&A started much earlier than most other Q&As.
Because we got the talk out of the way in advance.
Exactly.
Just good. I don't think I could have done the kind of video editing, like the kind of like presentation that I put together if I hadn't recorded it in advance.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to add or say?
I don't know. I do want to reemphasize that I am really interested in other people's takes on how Korra can tie into this, but I personally going to be deeply agnostic on the matter. And so if I bounce around, like if I bounce to the breakout rooms and that sort of thing, like I just don't touch it. It's a lot. So breakout rooms start at 1:30. We can give everyone a break. Yeah, so I think we've covered a lot of this. I really am so pleased with how analogous to Confession the very last bit was. I basically bounced around my apartment for like 5 minutes after I found it.
We do have a couple of questions now coming in right at the end. One is, what is your most precious moment in the series?
So I've rewatched the series a couple of times, but the second few times I've rewatched it recently through Zuko's eyes specifically. I kind of caught myself tearing up at, like, I was afraid you lost your way. I did lose my way. My husband wanted me to point out yesterday that you have a very distinctive scent is something that could actually be pulled in because the reason icons have long noses is because they smell the divine, which I thought was really cool. I didn't know that until he told me about this yesterday, and I'm like, why didn't you mention this 3 months ago? You live with me. But yeah, that one was really poignant. I think it actually it hits harder and better than a lot of the other emotional beats that they've tried to hit. That one was really earned.
I think for me, the prodigal son scene is so, it's so great that I'm going to go to my second favorite scene, which is when Iroh tells Zuko that he misinterpreted the history of their family, the thing that he wanted to tell him. You know, Iroh has led Zuko on this journey from his dungeon cell to the archives to hear the true story of his great-grandfather. And Zuko comes back and confronts him. He's very angry. And he says, you just told me everything that everybody already knows about my great-grandfather. Why did you do this? And he's like, basically, no, not that great-grandfather. Your other great-grandfather. Your other great-grandfather is the Avatar Roku. And he's like, Zuko's very shocked by this, as is the audience at this point. But he's not only shocked, it really devastates him to know that he has this relationship with the Avatar, because he knows what the Avatar is. He knows that Aang is the next incarnation of his great-grandfather. So what does this do? You know, I mean, am I hunting my own great-grandfather now? You know, so it's just a very interesting moment, because it really hits Zuko very hard emotionally. It's not just, oh, wow, cool, I'm the great-grandson of the Avatar too. It's like, no way, I am not. You know, I think that is one of the key moments in Zuko's journey, when he realizes that he does have a connection to the Avatar. And when he tells his father that he knows his destiny, that his destiny is to help the Avatar. I think that's the moment that basically leads him to that point.
Yeah, I think there's also, like, just if I want to expand this beyond Zuko and Iroh and to a kind of everyone thing, there is a little moment in the Ember Island Players, which is really understated, where Toph is wondering why everyone's so bent out of shape. And Zuko sits her down and explains that she gets to see her greatest hits, but everyone else gets to see their greatest failings. And that, as like, and of course mangled by this like over the top campy troop, but that as an indicator of why the entire team is straight up not having a good time right now, I thought was really it was very insightful, because we've just spent this whole episode kind of lampooning them, and they are seeing their failings wrapped up before their eyes. And I can, like, it reminds us we haven't always succeeded this whole time. We're about to embark on our final our final giant episode arc, and wrap everything up and take down the bad guy, yada, 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 yada. But right before we get there, we look back at where we failed.
Yeah. Okay, here's an interesting question, and I'm curious if you have a response for this. Have you heard the thing about Iroh and making tea, explaining his firebending technique and the balance required for it? I guess the relationship between tea and firebending and balance.
I have not, but I may have gone down a little bit of a tea making rabbit hole, a research rabbit hole sometime last year to find out how you make tea without like a timer and a kettle. And I can see how those are related. I have not heard the thing. I think it's cool that someone has written that meta. I would be interested in being sent that meta. You can find me on Twitter at Edith of Milan. But yeah, all tea requires a specific temperature. Yeah, sorry, I like tea on its own. Tea on its own as a thing. Each stage has different temperatures that they need to be heated at optimally, and so in modern days you can use a thermometer for it. But I was wondering how you did it before we had thermometers, so I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole, and it's about the like temperature of water and how long you let it sit for and the consistency of the liquor. Like you have to pre-steep. It's this whole big ordeal to figure out how to do it. And then once you've done it right and you get the hang of it, it like comes more naturally. And it's this whole big preparation ceremony. It makes a lot of sense that it has to do with like that Iroh's particular approach to things is that kind of meticulous. I think that's something to be said for him. He's definitely meticulous, balanced, and patient. But I haven't heard that thing. That's a cool thing.
That looks like the last of our questions.
All right.
I just want to, in terms of Korra.
Yeah, no, go for it. Like have opinions.
I just want to say that I do take Zuko's arc as canon in Korra because I think that we see the seeds of it at the end of Avatar. And it's just wonderful to see how Korra expands upon that and how he becomes, the most trusted counselor of Aang and a lifelong friend of Aang. So I think that that's a direction that I was hoping to see in Korra, and maybe it's because it's what I want to see that I really love it. But I do take that part as
I'm mostly mad that we didn't get to meet Sokka and Suki's kids. Like I'm really mad about that.
Yeah, okay.
I wanted to meet them so badly.
I think that's pretty much the end of our session. And I'd like to thank Erin for coming and answering all these questions. I really enjoyed her talk, and it was because I knew her talk was coming and knew that I was going to be responding to some talks. I didn't know which ones at the time. That I zeroed in on making it my mission to watch all of Avatar and all of Legend of Korra last summer before the semester started.
I've been trying to get people to watch it because I've been trying to get this talk together for a while. I've been trying to get my friends to watch. I'm like, guys, you have this many months to finish watching this show.
Yeah, I just basically, binged it, and am glad I did because, in my opinion, this is my humble opinion, Avatar is one of the closest things to a perfect series that I've ever seen.
It's phenomenally planned. And I know they had originally talked about a book 4, but I don't actually know where they would have gone with that.
Yeah.
I think it was very well laid out, and I think the tightness of original Avatar is part of what made me disappointed in Korra.
I can understand that. Yeah.
Because it's very well done. So I definitely, yeah. We have it on DVD.
I'd just like to, in terms of some housekeeping here, I'd just like to mention that our third session starts at 2:30, and we will have breakouts before then. And so thank you, Erin, for coming and talking with us. And I really enjoyed your talk. And I also just really enjoyed the fact that you prompted me to go see this amazing show, because I just ended up loving it so much. So thank you for that. It is so good. So if those of you who have not seen Avatar, please go see it. It is really, really good.
And my talk's up on YouTube now, so in perpetuity.
So thank you, and hope to see you around at Doxacon.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.